begin now, and if people join in, then they can catch up from there. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining in. It's always so lovely to see all of your faces. Sorry that my face isn't on because my internet is being very unruly ever since I came to upstate New York. So please bear with my voice. For today's knowledge talk, we have with us the awesomest ever, Cecilia Scolaro. Please correct me if your name pronunciation is
Very good.
in. Okay, great. So, today, I think everyone kind of knows about Gaza Travel Agency a little bit, but we're going to be exploring it more in detail. Before that, I just want to give a very quick intro about Cecilia Scolaro, who is a designer, an educator, and consultant working in responsible design with more than 20 years of experience helping teams design with greater care, equity, and awareness. She co founded Design Reparations, a practice exploring how design can heal, repair, and restore rather than extract and exploit, and works to build more caring, reciprocal, and decolonizing relationships between designers and indigenous communities. Her work spans humanitarian contexts, community led design, and experiments in shifting power within design processes. And today, as I mentioned earlier, she'll share her reflections from Design Reparations and one of its projects, and also Gaza Travel Agency, a speculative design piece presented at Dutch Design Week 2025. And she'll also discuss why these approaches matter for humanitarian designers. And we're also joined by Tiago today, who's driving. So I'm not going to bother you, Tiago, with your introduction, but just a little bit on Tiago. He helps bridge design and decolonization and regeneration to nurture and activate the emergence of equitable systems and reciprocal relationships. And he also, Cecilia, has 20 years of design expertise with 12 in social impact. And yeah, we're very happy to be joined by Tiago today, even during his most busy times. Uh, and I leave it now to you, Cecilia, to also start off with a very brief introduction on your journey into this field before we dive into design reparations and Gaza Travel Agency. So, passing the mic to
Thanks.
you. Thank you, Cecilia.
Thank you for the nice introduction. Well, lots of you knows me, but I put together some kind of slides to talk a little bit more about my journey and in responsible design first, and then in design reparation and how then we got to Gaza Travel Agency. So yeah, I'll share a little bit my screen. All right. So, yes, the point of today is, walking you through a little bit my journey from responsible design to design reparation to Gaza Travel Agency. As was mentioned, I have 20 years experience. I'm turning 43 in a couple of days. And my pronouns are she, her, and I'm Italian living in the Netherlands for 17 years. And I worked in many different spaces. And before I get into it, I don't know who's coming, but anyway, the everything is designed to be quite accessible. But if you have any need, you can always get in touch with me. There are a couple of things I'll mention that are not really nice, like climate collapse, marginalization, colonialism. So make sure you take care of yourself, and some of this content may make you uncomfortable. So I invite you to explore that discomfort as well. But also, this is collaborative. I put together some slides, but feel free to interrupt, to ask questions, and trying to participate as you like. So yeah, as I mentioned, I worked in very different areas of design. And as I often say, there are as many design labels as there are designers out there, because everybody picks a bit of different flavors. So I explored a lot of them. Uh, but yeah, it's been a lot with the initial, assumption that I was solving problems, that I was making life better for people. And yeah, but the more I was designing, the more I started to see that design was not just solving problems, but was also contributing to over extraction. Um, does anybody know what the Earth Overshoot Day is?
Yes, so the Earth Overshoot Day corresponds to the ability for the planet Earth to create resources versus the time it takes for the entire human population to use those resources. And so we say that normally we shouldn't consume more than what the planet Earth can generate. And so it happens that since, as far as I can see, 1973, we are spending more than what the planet Earth can generate. Therefore, and it goes faster and faster, we see that nowadays in July we have already used the entire resources that the planet Earth could generate within 1 year.
Exactly. So this line, this blue line here, indicates the time of the year when we have finished the resources that have been regenerated for that year. And the rest of the time of the year, we actually are borrowing from the future, essentially. But this is also a global average, because this day looks very different if you're analyzing the global south. And this day is much, much earlier if you are taking the global north, or like the UK, for example, is as early as the 20th of May. And this over extraction is also causing a lot of social disparity, with people extracting cobalt, for example, for all the technology that we design. And design is also often providing a tech-driven imagination of the future. So this picture on the left was taken yesterday by my colleague Jessica, that went to an event for social impact entrepreneurs. And the whole thing was design around how to deliver more impact with AI. So there is this idea that the future is better, and the future must be technological, and that doesn't take into account the impact that all of this technology has, but also it's essentially a narrative that we have been told, because there is no actual proof that technology does improve all of our lives. And it actually creates a lot of trash and a lot of extraction again. So this I cannot find like more recent numbers, but in 2023 there were 29 billion devices connected to the internet, including machine to machine. So for each human being, there are at least 3 or 4 devices on the earth, and they all become trash. So on average, in 1 year, in Europe, people have around 22 kilograms of e-waste produced. 22 kilos of e-waste every year, that is extremely toxic, and most of the times is shipped to the global south. And yeah, I saw when the 9 planetary boundaries that does anybody else know about the planetary boundaries? Yes. So this time I'll try to explain it. So in 2019, I think, or 9 the first time, the Stockholm Resilience Center measured the health of our planet, or actually how healthy is the ecosystem for our existence as human beings, with 9 criteria. And out of the 9, actually, this is there is a one updated for a couple of months ago. Out of the 9 planetary boundaries, we currently have overshot 7 of them, of which climate change is just one of them. And this is also fed by this idea of infinite growth, the continuous economic growth, continuous expansion, scaling, better, bigger, stronger. And that is also in the SDGs. You know, these are Sustainable Development Goal number 8 is also decent work and economic growth. So that's the idea is permeating in everything that we do. But that's just a bit of a short oversight of how design practices and methodologies are all connected to power, extraction, control, supremacy, separation, and externalization of impact. And that's one of the key realizations that I had in my own journey as a designer. And one of them has to do a lot with colonization, and specifically how design contributes to imposing Eurocentric perspectives. Because if you look at these pictures on the left, like a Missoni pattern, and I'm choosing fashion design, but I could do it with any piece of design. A Missoni pattern, a Gucci pattern is called design, but a Ghana traditional pattern is not normally called design. It's called folkloristic or craft. Or a chair of Marcel Wanders is called design, but a Balinese, Javanese chair is not necessarily called design. So what we call design and what is included in the practice is often very much moved by Eurocentric perspectives, which also mean that perpetuates the idea of individual creative genius. Because we have all of these ideas in the design space, there is like someone that has all the ideas and that can solve all the problem. And if you just, Google greatest innovators of all time, you find all of these people, and 90% of the case, you're looking at white men. But if you look at other cultures, like for example, the Aboriginal communities in Australia, there is a completely different idea of creativity as a collective activity, as a collective consciousness, and the expression of a collective consciousness through art. And last for today, but it could go a bit longer. Also, design helps this idea of universal intellectual property and compared to what is considered local knowledge. And that's particularly true in the humanitarian sector, where traditional indigenous practices are only seen in their value of the local application. They're seldomly seen as universally applicable. Instead, everything that comes from the global north is automatically considered as universal and universally applicable. And that is really particularly applicable to the science of design. So all of this to say that there are a lot of systems that have informed the way that design and the humanitarian sector and sustainable development works. And for me, it's been really a journey of trying to understand the systems and see how they were showing up in my own design practice. And for me, it meant also defining responsible design as a way of prioritizing respect, equity, and regeneration in the design of everything and move away from these extractive systems. So it starts from looking at the impact that design can have from an individual, a collective, and an environmental perspective. That's a very common way of slicing it. It doesn't mean it's the only way to do it, but it helps identifying which potential negative and positive impact the design that you are creating has. But also means holding abundance of realities, because the practice of responsibility means being able to accept the negatives and understanding the historical injustices, the ongoing harms that people are still experiencing, and at the same time supporting the positive and designing for self-determination, for regeneration, for repairing. But without the one without the other becomes either toxic positivity or complete lack of action. So the two things are necessary at the same time. So if you do change your system of reference and you move away from colonization and extraction and you center decolonization, equity, ecocentrism, regeneration, humility, interconnectedness, and so on, then you can explore different practices of design. And this is a visualization that I have worked on over the years that maps a lot of different practices that are out there and that they are somehow connected by the similar principles that we were talking about. And they go from privacy by design to trauma informed to equity and justice to circular design. And somehow they share a lot of the principles, a lot of the practices, and that's the definition that I am personally using for responsible design. So all of this is just a little bit of a overview of what responsible design is and what for me it's meant becoming essentially an educator. And my learning journeys are available on my websites. And especially you have seen a little bit of a glimpse of what Foundations of Responsible Design is, and you can access a special humanitarian designer discount if you want to look at the learning journeys available. So this brings me to design reparations, because as I was explaining before, one of the key aspects of the work that I started to analyze is colonialism and how much that actually shows up in a lot of the design practices. And in this journey, I met Tiago, who's also a designer and who's also busy with thinking about different ways we could evolve the design practice. And that has also worked a lot with indigenous people. And so when we met at just a networking event, I was let's have a workshop for my students. It would be very nice. And then the things actually evolved quite quickly. And why do we talk about indigenous people in the first place? Is because it's been calculated that indigenous people steward 80% of the world's most biodiverse regions. Effectively, their way of living and the way of relating of many of these populations is what keeps our Earth healthy and alive and good for everybody to live on. So we start from the important assumption that there is so much wisdom in this way of living, thinking, and designing, and that as designers from all over the world, there is a lot that we can learn from them. At the same time, we are also very aware are not willing to replicate a system of extraction, and just get knowledge out of them and applying somewhere else. So that's how we got together and we shaped design reparation with this idea of reciprocity. So creating forms of collaboration between designers, creatives, and innovators with indigenous and ancestral knowledge holders, with the idea that ancestral knowledge holders lead and guide everything that we do, but also support their own goals, their own initiatives. So indigenous people have their own work, and a lot of it is in the space of climate justice and social justice. And the idea is designers can support these initiatives and at the same time learn from them different ways of being. So everything started with just a simple drawing like this one when Tiago and I met. And we were trying to really visualize how this exchange and the reciprocity could take place, and how design, university, institution, companies, organization could actually support this collaboration. And it grew. So now we are actually working with a lot of indigenous communities around the world. Some are in Ecuador, in Brazil, in Cameroon, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in the Philippines. These are our main partners, but we have also other people that are getting in touch with us because they see the work that we are doing and they would like to, get more of our support. And we are struggling with the resources available. And also we have a lot of designers and creatives that want to join because together we do real projects. Some of them are a bit smaller, like we organized a workshop with the Caribbean communities in the Netherlands, or an online session with Princess Abumbi from the Bafut community in Cameroon. But some of them are bigger. So with Can Get Content High, we've been partnering up since last year. They represent the Samia community from Lake Victoria in Kenya. And their main purpose was around climate resilience and regeneration in their community. And we started working with them, and we started exploring their traditional practices. And what we learned is that a lot of the new generations in their own communities were actually getting disenfranchised and disconnected from their traditions, moving to the city. They didn't care anymore, basically. So we decided that we would interview elders. So you see here there is our people in Kenya talking with Mzee Manga. And we took all of these interviews and we created a series of ways to share it in first place with the local community, but beyond that as well. So we have a series of videos that you can check on YouTube. We have a book and we have comics, especially thought out for local youth. But we also organized a workshop between the elders, the youth, and the local government to discuss about climate change and how traditional practices could help the community. And also with part of this, we went to Nairobi Design Week and started really trying to engage designers in the conversation and trying to let them also be inspired by their own traditions, by their own roots, and not just, live in the expectation that they have to invent something completely new whenever they design something. But innovation can be also an act of remembering, whatever our ancestors were also really accustomed to do. So yeah, that gives you a bit of an idea of what design reparation is in general, and then I get to Gaza Travel Agency, the initial reason for this call. And Gaza Travel Agency also was born to support an indigenous community, which is the Palestinians. It is, of course, a very special indigenous community because most of the people you see on this picture are actually Palestinians. And of all of them, I think only a couple grew up in actual Palestine. Most of them grew up in all different places, Kuwait, Syria, Emirates, and everywhere in the world. But they still call themselves Palestinians, and they still have a longing and an important need to be able to go back to their ancestral place. And that's how they approached us. So everything started around the end of 2024, so with 1 year ago. And this group of Palestinian diaspora and also Jewish people were coming together and trying to advocate for the right of return. And there were some leaked documents that were saying that Israel was trying to expel the Palestinians from Gaza and bring them in Canada or DRC or somewhere else in the world. And so they wanted to expose these plans and trying to bring back the conversation on the right of return, which is a legal human right that was granted to the Palestinians since 1948, but has actually never been delivered. So the Palestinians since 1948 have been told, yes, you will be able to go back to your original home, but that was never actually possible. So they came to us with like, okay, we want to make a media campaign, we want to be very visible. And then, we put together a team of designers that volunteered, and we started working with it. And we really started from a design perspective of thinking, okay, who do we want to talk with? And we realized that we really wanted to make something um, that talked about return in a very hopeful manner, like in a positive manner. Also to break a bit this idea that everything associated with Gaza and Palestine must be about death, and destruction, which is an important topic to talk about, but it cannot be the only one. And so we played with a lot of ideas, and then we found in the keffiyeh, which is the traditional scarf of Palestinian culture, this symbol of these two. These are supposed to be olive tree leaves, but we looked at them and said, oh, they also look like a bird, and a bird can fly, and a bird can always know where home is. So that's where we decided to, embrace this shape of the bird and this kind of pastel colors, and explore this way of talking about a very political strong message, but in a very hopeful, joyful manner, talking about home as a very universal need. And then somewhere in April, someone from the team said, why don't we go to Dutch Design Week? Because there is where the elite go. And the elite is somehow the target audience that still hasn't embraced the Palestinian struggle yet. And that also tells something about the design, by the way. And as a matter of fact, we were the only exhibition in the whole Dutch Design Week in 2025, which is very large, completely dedicated to Palestine. And we decided to look for a space, and it was already quite late for normal planning, but there were also a lot of people that really wanted to help us. So we got this container for free in Paes, which is at the right at the center of Dutch Design Week. And we set up Gaza Travel Agency as a speculative design project, meaning what would be a future where something like this can happen and people from Gaza can just enter a travel agency and plan their return home. And we had there stewards, which was a mix of Palestinian people and international people, ready to welcome people inside and give them a tour. So you see at the beginning, you see here Marianne, she's showing all the little dots on the map. And I think there is a bigger picture here. So all the little dots on the maps are places that were ethnically cleansed in 1948. That is ancestral Palestine, now called Israel. And 750,000 people were pushed from all these places into Gaza. So 80% of the people in Gaza are actually refugees or descendants from all of these places. But what is less known is that most of these places remained completely empty ruins because Israel didn't find enough people to actually fill them. So given the circumstances of Gaza right now, we wanted to bring back the right of return as the solution for all of this situation, instead of sending Palestinians somewhere else in the world. And as you can see, we had a selection of different destinations, like a real travel agency. And for each destination, we had identified a way to get there. So you could go to Al Main by bike because it's only 5 kilometers away from the border of Gaza. You can go to Ikrit, which is the furthest away from Gaza, very close to the border with Lebanon, with only 5 hours of bus ride. And you could go to Lida by plane. And the reason why we said by plane is because Lida used to be the airport of Palestine, and it's now Tel Aviv airport. So for each of these locations, you see there is a portrait, and each story is of a Palestinian that is somehow connected to these places for several reasons. One of the important people connected to these places is this guy over here, Salman Abu Sita, who is a researcher who is originally from Al Mahin and who started writing about the right of return and the plans for return already 30 years ago. And these plans are really detailed and feasible and doable. So return is very easy from a logistical standpoint. And also, you may notice on the background of everything, there is this kind of small text covering the whole container. And that is a collection of all the UN resolutions and the pieces of international law that have supported the right of return since 1948. So yeah, that gives you a bit of an idea of the experience that we had, and we also had very positive reactions and interaction with people. We had 6,400 visitors in total, which was a lot of people to talk with, and a lot of people that came in said, "I didn't know about this. This is really makes a lot of sense. I don't understand why nobody's talking about it." And so it was like kind of really addressing people that were not necessarily already very active for Palestine, but they walked out with a different perspective. And Trouw, which is one of the largest newspapers in the Netherlands, wrote several articles, one article about us online, but also this, which is even more important, they wrote an article about the right of return and Abu Sita's plan. This is Abu Sita now, who is 88, I think. So it means that also our goal of bringing the right of return on, let's say, the mainstream conversation actually was achieved. And one of the very nice output that we didn't set up for, but it just happened, is that a lot of Palestinian people got to know each other more, because a lot of Palestinians didn't know a lot of other Palestinians in the Netherlands. So it really created a sense of community, and that was also really, really beautiful to experience and to support. So yeah, that gives you a bit of an idea, and we are trying to do more and more projects like this one, and we are also trying to engage organizations to support this kind of project also internally with the projects of reimagination, so using indigenous guidance to think and reimagine more just and ecological futures, and also projects of transformations where we can help companies and no-profits and all sorts of organizations be inspired and guided by indigenous wisdom. If you're interested, you look up at our circles. We always have vacatures or opening for new volunteers on all of the different circles that we run. And you can follow us on Instagram as Design Reparations and bring us a home. And you can always get in touch with me for any specific need or wish that you'd like to explore. I wanted just to keep this time of the rest of the time to more as a discussion. And if you have questions or ideas or thoughts that you'd like to know more about.
Wow, thank you so much, Cecilia. That was such a thoughtfully curated presentation. I deeply enjoyed it. I think this was my favorite one so far, if I may be biased. But I really loved how you began and how you kind of built up to Design Reparations and then Gaza Travel Agency. And thank you for all of the, um, Gwen, actually, thank you for all of the um, animations that you're doing. I don't know how you're doing it, but it's very cool. I wanted to do that too. I think I personally have a question before like I open up the question and answer to everyone else, if you don't mind. I deeply resonated with a lot of what you have shared with us today, and one of them was like about colonization and design in general. I was studying in a master's program where much of the faculty was mainly from the global north. So I found it extremely quite hard to communicate my ideas. So even though it was a very open and friendly space, and we were encouraged to bring ourselves and our ideas, and my thesis was on decolonizing education through the lens of the Vedic education system, which was more an Indian indigenous education system, which persists to this day, but not as it used to be before we were colonized by several empires. It was really hard to get across uh, the idea of the indigenous education system, even though I was in an education setting. And even though it seemed like we were all using the same buzzwords like decolonization, um, I would like to ask you, how do you then communicate to people um, your ideas when everyone is kind of on they're using the same words, but maybe they're not in the same realities? You did speak about an abundance of realities. So if you could elaborate on how you communicate and bring people into maybe the same reality or on the same page.
Yeah, that's a very nice question, and maybe I'm gonna give my answer. Maybe Tiago also, if you want to add on that. But our starting point is establishing relationships, because we believe that if you start to if you get to know different ways of being and different ways of knowing, and you get to know people that carry those, that's going to become really apparent, because each of us carries some level of indigeneity or some level of connection, or lack of. So that's also something that you can feel, connection with the land, with your roots. And for us, when you work with people that have those roots, it becomes really self evident that there is so much that you can actually learn. So rather than going from a kind of I don't know, rational explanation why you should do it, we trying to create the opportunities for that conversation to happen. And of course, that's not always easy to get it started, So um, that's definitely the challenge as well that we face. But at the same time, we are very keen in trying to create safe spaces for our indigenous partners. So we make sure that wherever we bring them in, they're not going to be suffering aggressions or microaggression or extraction by people that didn't have enough scrutiny in their own colonial mindset. Tiago, do you want to add anything?
First, I want to thank you everyone for being here. I think it's my first. It is my first participation on this community, so I should have done that before. But well, that's the time is now. I want to thank also Meda for the introduction. Um, but yeah, just add something related to their relationship. I think it's a very, and I think we are relating all the time with everything. We are ecosystems as well, what sustain us, the foods, the organs, and so on. But I think what we are trying to learn with also the people that we are in relationship with these communities as well. It is it's a type of relationship where we see in nature as well. So that it is a mutual exchange. It is a caring relationship, which is very difficult to bring that in such a transaction world that we live, run by marketing, run by capitalism, and so on. So for me, like being with people from different places as well, it feels like, it's more like establishing a connection again with the human being, which is very difficult to do indeed, and we are learning how to do that in such different spaces as well, right? Because of that comes trust. I think what we have been robbed as well from um, our experiences in this new area that we live in in a sort of it is the trust. It is the trust that we could have in people as well. So I think it's a lot about that as well, establishing the trust and name as well what is it's stopping us from having this mutual and reciprocal relationship that we get and we give back with respect. Um, so yeah, it's about, I think that's the reparation when we try to talk. I think that's one of the reasons also we started Design Reparations, really to repair this. Though repairing something that is already broken, it's impossible. Many people don't tell me that. How can we repair this relationship, right? So it's in a way transform, but the reparation still is there as a call out to for us to reflect on that. So yeah, so that's how I don't know if answers your question, but it is something that we we struggle sometimes also to deal that with in different spaces.
Of course, yeah, I think it beautifully answers my question. Thank you so much, Cecilia and Tiago, for bringing up the relationality and trust, and maybe just giving it more time would be helpful in showcasing different realities to different groups of people and bringing us together. I opened the. I know I can hog the space immediately because I was so curious, but I opened the dice for question and answers with Julia and Tiago here. So if any of you are curious about anything, please do share.
I have a question. You were saying that the Bring Gaza Home project was a big success, which is brilliant. Well done. I'm just wondering, obviously there's yeah, and thank you for all the presentation. I'm just wondering, as there's obviously a huge need for the awareness on that topic in the design world, are you planning on bringing that project to any other design weeks next year, or yeah?
Yes, that's a great question. So that was also the most common question that we got to Gaza Travel Agency. Where are you bringing this next? So we are exploring different places we can bring it, also beyond the design weeks, because as was mentioned, the target audience we are trying to reach is, let's say, the average person that is not necessarily a designer, and Dutch Design Week is very specific because it opens and it's quite, welcoming kind of different thinking. And not all design weeks, I think, would be good for Gaza Travel Agency. But in general, we are looking for more places to bring it. and consider that we are also trying to make it a little bit sustainable, because everything that you've seen was actually produced with a lot of donations of like everything that was printed was donated by print shops. Everybody, we had 30 volunteers working on it, and every object and like locations was donated by someone. So yeah, it was a lot of work in terms also of coordination. So we are also trying to figure out what is a sustainable way of bringing it forward. But definitely, it's what we are planning to.
Thank you, Beatrice, for your question. Is there anyone else? Hosam, I think you might have a question.
Yes, please. So, first of all, I just want to also say thank you so much for this. I think not only the presentation, but also the project itself is it's really, I don't know, it's really important. I would say, like, it's one of the most important projects, like that I've seen on Gaza, maybe in the last 2 years or so. And I also have contacted you about this. I told you about this before. Like, this is really important. But I just have one question that I'm a bit confused about. Um, do you add like the level of time as well as one more dimension to, like to track indigeneity? I don't know. I'm not sure if this is the correct word or not. Like, how long have these people been living there to be considered indigenous in this case? Because this is, like a lot of the time, this is like the argument that people, like raise. Oh no, they have been there for like 100 years or something, which
Yeah.
is not considered indigenous. So, so I wonder if you add, like this dimension of time as well. Yeah.
It's a great question, and also something that we've been debating a lot about. What is indigenous in general, like beside Palestine, but with everything that we work with. And we also recognize this word has a lot of is loaded for many reasons, and not all of the people we work with necessarily define themselves indigenous. Like the people in Kenya we work with, they were like, "Are we indigenous?" We're like, "Yeah, well, it depends." So, but the criteria that we decided to apply is the connection with the land and the connection with it's the ecosystem of the land. And in that sense, I can tell you that all the Palestinian people we have worked with, they can tell you exactly the plants, the fruits that the land bears, and the traditions in their culture that are connected to the place and to the geography of the place and to the rivers of the place. So in that sense, it's what we decide to use as a definition, which is not only ours, by the way. So that doesn't exclude people that feel that connection and that they also seek cooperation. So one of our key partners for Gaza Travel Agency is Zochrot. And Zochrot is an Israeli organization committed to the return of Palestinians and the human rights of Palestinians and of all the beings that live in that land. So it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of relation.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
Yeah, just to
Thank
add,
you.
indeed, it's. Can you hear me all?
Yeah.
Indeed, what Cecilia said about people don't see themselves as a traditional, or they see themselves like the group we work with the Samia. They see themselves as Samia. If you ask someone from some people in Amazon, they're going to see themselves as the name of they defined as a people. So the indigenous part also in some cases has been used as a way of um, almost like the colonizers put this a label upon us to so it is, yeah, there's a tension on that, and there's a tension also when people claim some that they are indigenous. I was in a meeting where people, it was this guy who's working with I think he's German. He was working with people in Brazil, in the middle of the arid place in Brazil. There's some indigenous leaders as well, and he was claiming to be also indigenous, and in a room with full of indigenous people that claim to be indigenous. It wasn't good. I can tell you that. So it is, yeah, it is a complex thing for us, but I think what Cecilia brought up, it is indeed. It's not so much for us to define, but I think what we also wanted to give voice is for those who haven't, um, their voice has been erased and silenced, right? So their culture has been erased and silenced for imperial or colonial, yeah, process as well, and in states projects.
Cedric?
Thank you, Tiago, Cedric.
Thank you for the presentation, of course. I was happy to hear about it. I'll group my questions. You say that under the Dutch Design Week, you applied under speculative design. Was that forced in order to fit in the program, or were there categories where you could show more activism, let's say, or more, other keywords, let's say? Because, for example, with humanitarian designers, when we applied to France Design Week, there was no strategic design, there was no humanitarian design, there was no social design. So we had to write to them, and that's my second question. Did you have conversation with Dutch Design Week about those things, and were you able to change some little things about how they work, bringing some of your values? And my last question is slightly different, but I've seen all the circles, and I'm wondering how they emerged. Are they a bit opportunistic in a sense that someone shows up and is motivated, like a bit like humanitarian designers as well? Or were they very targeted because you had some personal attachment or whatever? Yep.
Okay, so on the first question, I think it touches upon something that I didn't mention before, is that we approach the whole thing with the assumption they will not let us do it. It was really like, someone is gonna stop us, someone is gonna boycott us, someone is gonna be physically violent with us. So much so that, I open a special insurance. I organized a nonviolent communication training for everybody just before, but also before when we approached Dutch Design Week, we really approached it like, okay, before we fill out the form, we have this idea. If you think that that it's viable, we fill out the form. Otherwise, we don't bother. And we were actually surprised by the fact that everybody was supportive, and of course a bit cautious at the beginning, because whenever you bring up Palestine, they were like, yeah, but what is it that you're bringing? And so we chose speculative design, a bit because we wanted to explore that speculation. Kind of, that was very much our intention, because we felt it strategically was a good way to enter in conversation with people. But also to be recognized by designers, because like most of the people in the team that they especially the Palestinian part, they've never heard about speculative design before. It was like, okay, I had to explain to them where it came from. So sometimes it's also kind of really in bubble terms that we use. And but yeah, the organization of Dutch Design Foundation, must say, was supportive They also included us in the press tour of the Dutch Design Foundation. So yeah, we had low expectation, to be honest, but it was overall positive. And I think again that sometimes we have a lot of labels, but it doesn't actually matter to the public, because the public were coming in and they didn't care if something was speculative or something else. Yeah, no worries, Beatrice. Very nice to see you. And the other question is about the circles, and so the sad truth is that we first circle we wanted to have was with Cameroon. We had a full project ready, and then we found a good grant we could apply to, and it was a grant to design projects for collaboration with Africa, but Cameroon was not on the list because Cameroon has a civil war going on. And so we had to look into our other relationships in Africa, and Tiago found Kenge, and then we rewrote the project for Kenya. So let's say that we try to put intention, but there are a lot of factors that influence also the projects, like funding availability or relationships of the people that we actually know. But we have also one consideration is that we decided that there is a lot of work done for indigenous people in North America, Australia, and New Zealand, and they are very well organized, and probably we really can't add too much value, but there is relatively less work, and they are less heard, the indigenous communities in Africa, in South America, and in Asia. So that is a bit of the criteria that we applied.
Yeah, may I add something? I think it's a good question, Cedric. Thank you. I think it makes me think about something that we talked, Cecilia, about these projects, like, especially if you came with Kenya as well, like how much, because we use a term, call it community led or indigenous led, but meaning that if you're going to do a project, we need a certain the people that we are working with, which will lead the project in a sense. In many ways, sometimes we know we have to do together because there is no organizational structure or process or whatever. We also needed to be open to learn from them and understand. But yeah, it needs something. It's complex because somehow if you're talking about grants, grant would also ask something from them. And a lot of we found out that our partners as well, sometimes they are, I'm going to use terms like unicorns. They're very, very special, not unicorns, but there are people that had that work hard for, but also had privileges to get where they are, to be able to navigate between, the in the communities where they live and within, all these systems that are asking for grants, aid, and so on. So yeah, it's complicated because sometimes we got invitation or ask from someone who doesn't yet have an organization or doesn't yet have even people to help to take on the project. So there's also something to think of how we could support it, communities like that. They could partner with others that have more people to work on the project. Also, sometimes the projects that we're working on, we can go so far. It will depend of the partner as well, because we call it partner because they ask us to call it partners. But the limitation is not that we are taking. We're really learning how to not be on the front seats which is again, perpetuating the colonial structure, which we are also asked about sometimes. Oh, are you doing like a gatekeeper? It sounds like. But then we also reflect, like, I know, for example, King or there's another organization and person in Malawi, or in the same case of Cameroon, we has a blockade of aid, a blockade of projects that go to the country. It's for the genocide, but also the government itself or the systems there. They're really like isolated. So I think, okay, how we can, there's a role to connect, to play, but yeah, how do we do that in a way that is responsible? So it's also just leaving a question here in the reflection. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tiago and Cecilia. I think, Tiago, that was a perfect question to kind of conclude our knowledge talk session today on. I personally think that if you all want to continue having a discussion and having some more reflections together, then I would urge all of you to please continue. However, I definitely have to drop off now due to some other commitment. So, in lieu of that, I want to thank both of you today. Thank you so, so much for all of your thoughtful work. You're doing extremely important work. And what I love, what I've heard from everything that I've heard today is how you're able to bring people together. And I think that's very important. I love the fact that you said there were Palestinians in Netherlands who hadn't met other Palestinians, and now through you, they were able to come together. And I'm sure that's the story for all of your other projects as well. So it's amazing what you are bringing to the world. Thank you, Gwen. I really wanted to do that, but I haven't been able to use those animations. Thank you. So I hope you can hear me clapping, but that's the max. But thank you so much again, everyone, for joining. Please continue chatting if you need to hear. You're more than welcome to. But yeah, I will be dropping off now. So thank you so much, everyone. Bye bye.
Thank you, Meda, for organizing, and thank all
Thank
of
you,
you
Madam.
here. You know where to find us for everything else, and we hope to see you in our circles and our projects in the future. And thank also to Humanitarian Designers, who was an important partner for Gaza Travel Agency.
Indeed.
Upcoming
Thank you.
workshop, maybe.
Say it again.
An upcoming workshop in collaboration.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Indeed.
Okay. Indeed.
As a
Nice.
teaser for.
Indeed. We are very keen on organizing workshops and finding more opportunities, and we also find it super important that our partners get paid. So that's always what we want to ensure.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody. Hope
Thanks
to
a-
hear from you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Nice to see you, Sadie.
Bye.
See you soon.